Warning: this podcast may contain graphic and triggering content. Please listen at your own risk. Each individual struggle is different, and everyone's recovery and healing journey is different. Please reach out to a certified medical professional if you need help. Welcome to episode 41 of Stomp the Stigma, the podcast aimed to fight the stigma surrounding mental health through education, awareness, experiences, stories, resources, and the vulnerable truth. This week's episode is part 2 of my very special segment with Daniela from The Often Unseen. If you didn't hear part 1, go back and listen to episode 40. But in this episode, we get into her experience with hypervigilance and micromanaging to make sure that nothing goes wrong for her husband and her family. We got to talk about what she experienced and kind of the side effects of his PTSD. She tells us how their lives have changed after the traumatic event, how her marriage has changed, and the importance of a safe space and support system for you as a caretaker and supporter. We also get to talk a little bit about her blog, why she started it, and her own mental health journey following everything that happened, as well as what she loves to do for her own self-care. I do want to touch on your hypervigilance and micromanagement that you brought up. Do you think that kind of came about because you are such a fixer? Do you think that still would have happened to you if you didn't have that type of personality?
I think so, because some of the things that I became hypervigilant about were really weird. Like, I don't know if it's my subconscious or my body, whatever. I became 100% attuned to my husband's sleep. And so he doesn't really have nightmares anymore, but when he would, I would wake up before he would. Like, I would hear his breathing change. I would feel his movements change before he even woke up. And so I would wake up first, and I would gently wake him and let him know, like, hey, you're safe. It's okay. Like, you're here. And so to be that attuned to like someone's breathing when you're asleep, like it was very strange.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is sort of what was the first time it happened. I was like, oh, that was weird. Because I'm a pretty decent sleeper. Like, my husband's alarm can go off without me waking up, or things like that. But I became 100% attuned to him next to me and how he was sleeping. And other things like when we moved. So this happened in September. We moved into our new house at the end of October. And I could not go to bed. I would check every door at least twice that it was locked, that our outside sensor lights were on, that our cars were locked. And I was never like that at our old house or living with my in-laws. So even that, which has eased up a little bit, but I would lie in bed knowing that I've checked twice, but sometimes I'd still get up and be like, no, did it? Just things like that, like safety lights, feeling safe. And then, so that's sort of like hypervigilance of what can I do to make myself feel safe, because that was such an unsafe thing to go through. And the micromanaging was more about, could we go somewhere or enjoy something and have John feel comfortable and safe. So, if we got invited to go to a friend's house for a barbecue or something, I would say, well, what time? Who's going to be there? What time is everyone coming? We'll arrive first. We'll leave. Always having a an entry and exit strategy, and being able to tell John exactly who's going to be there or who wouldn't be there, or how many people would be there, or what the plans are for the evening. Like, no, we're just going to hang out. Or are there games? Are we going to have a bonfire? Like, even though all those things are fine and not really related to anything, but being able to let him know exactly how things were going to go, what to expect, who to expect to see, and so that I could, basically just reinforce that sense of safety, like, for him. Or, going away is another big micromanaging thing that I'm trying to, like, let go of. But probably I didn't leave until it had been well over a year. Like, I didn't leave him and the kids, and not because it was like he's unsafe, but just because kids can be stressful under the best of circumstances, and his capacity for that stress was lower. And so I remember I was going overnight to Winnipeg, and I, like, had all the meals planned. I had, like, put my mother-in-law on standby, or just go check in, or even, like, he's been a dad for 9 years, totally capable, but it was just me micromanaging to, like, try and remind myself, like, this will be okay because you've taken care of all of this. It will be okay for you to not be there for 24 hours, but also to make it as stress-free as possible for him so that it's enjoyable for them. I don't want him to have to think about laundry or activities to do or what to cook. It's like, it's all there. So hopefully it's just, like, fun and rainbows and nothing bad pops up. And so that's one that I'm slowly, like, letting go of. And I mean, like, the other night I had to take my oldest to swimming lessons, and my youngest still needed a bath, and I was going to be like, here's her pajamas, and here's the towel, and here's the shampoo. And I was like, no, he knows how to give her a bath. Like, he'll figure it out. And so I just left, and sure enough, I came back and she was bathed and it was fine. And I was like, okay, like, slowly letting it go, and reminding myself that, like, it might not get done the way I want it to get done, or I think it needs to get done, but, like, he is capable, he can handle it, like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece of it too, is that it adjusts over time. Like, the capacity that he had for noise or big crowd or whatever in the beginning was super low. Like I said, Christmas dinner was not happening. And now, we just had a family birthday party for my nephew on Saturday, and it was great, and everyone was there, and the kids were loud, and there was, so I think a big piece of being a caretaker or a spouse of someone with PTSD is that, like, hopefully, if they're getting the help that they need, and they're moving forward in their healing, is that things change and they do adjust, and the capacity for things grows. But you have to be patient, and you have to probably get frustrated and probably feel resentful at times, like, because had this not happened, things would be different. Like, I could have gone on that girls' trip, or I could have asked you to do this, or we could have gone and done that, and letting go of the what could have been, or what might have been, or whatever. Like, you can't dwell on it, but there were definitely times when I felt resentment, like, this is not what I thought I was, what kind of partnership I thought I was marrying into. And then you pause and you're like, wow, that sounds awful. Okay, I've had that feeling. Let's move on from there. But I think that's where having those supports in place, where you can work through the feelings, because they're big feelings, and until you're in them, you don't know what it's going to be like, or how you're going to react, or how the dynamics are going to change. So having those supports of a safe space to be like, I am effing frustrated, or I am so pissed off, or why do I still have to do that? You have to have that safe space to vent or talk through things, and then be able to move forward. And I think that's where it can get tricky, is if you're just holding on to them and letting those things build. It can be, that's when shit goes bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So is there anything that has helped you kind of let go of that need for control or micromanage stuff? Or is that just kind of over time, as you've seen him heal and get better, that there's just less of a need for it?
Yeah, I think reminding myself that he's a good dad, he's a capable human,
Yeah.
it I know these things, and that I also just need to ask when I want things done, or I need things done, that I can delegate, that it's not going to cause an issue. But I don't like to ask for help. I don't like to, and that's just my Enneagram type 8 personality of I'm not good at asking for help. I want to feel confident and capable, and I can handle things. And so, yeah, I think just over time of having to remind myself that you can let go of that control. It's fine. Things will get done. Or they may not get done if it's not urgent, and that's okay too. But yeah, just that reminder over time of, this is okay. You can trust other people to take care of things, and it will be fine.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about people that have mental health struggles or mental illness. It doesn't make them any less capable of anything. They're not broken and unable to live life. You can
Yeah,
still
it's just
trust.
that it might get done in a different way.
Yeah.
Or it might take longer, or it might, they might say, no, I can't do that, and that's fine too. I think it's just for us figuring out what works for your dynamic, for your household, and having realistic expectations, I think, is another big one. My husband doesn't like to cook. He's not, usually, but so if I'm you're in charge of dinner tonight, I can expect it's probably going to be takeout, or something really simple, and that's okay. Or, can you do the dishes? Well, his big line is, yeah, I'll get to them. Whereas I'm I want them done now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm am I going to pick that battle of that you need to get done now, or I'm just going to trust that he'll say he's going to do them, and it'll be on his timeline. So, and he'll say that well, if you want them done now, go ahead, but I will get to them. And so I'm okay, I will let go of this piece of control and trust that they will get done.
Oh my gosh, that's tough.
It's but it's I think you get to a point where you're what battles am I willing to pick, and which ones just don't matter. But yeah, it's having realistic expectations and having those conversations. I need you to do this, or I need your help with this. And I think that goes for any relationship, really, mental illness, aside. But it can be harder when someone is dealing with, PTSD or whatever, because you're always a little afraid to rock the boat, I think.
Yeah.
You're always a little afraid to is this going to set them off? Did they have a bad day? Is this going to make them angry? Am I going to approach this in the right way? And so I think for for in our situation anyways, you kind of avoid those things as much as possible. And then, like I said, when you see that things are okay, you slowly start approaching these conversations again. Yeah. But it takes time, and it can be frustrating for sure
Mm-hmm.
to be in that caretaker role and feel like you don't always have a partner with you.
You mentioned earlier that it can be exhausting, caring for someone or just supporting someone in the way that they need. And for people that are listening, sometimes we call it compassion fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time you hear about it when caring for like an elderly parent or somebody like that, because you put so much time and effort into them, and you experience the same thing caring for your husband and doing everything you can to make sure that he's okay and not triggered and nothing goes wrong.
Yeah.
And I say it all the time on my page, actually, that it's so important to take care of yourself so that you can be the best version of you for everyone else. And so
Mm-hmm.
now that you are finally able to kind of show yourself some love and take care of yourself, what do you like to do for self-care, and what helps you kind of relax and unwind?
Um, I'm a really big extrovert, so like I love just being able to like get together with my girlfriends for coffee or a glass of wine, and just like that connection is what really recharges me. Um, I've started to take care of my physical health again, which has started to feel great. Writing the blog helps. I love to read. I love to like entertain and have friends over. Like I said, just like having those like physical connections with like other people is big for me, and what sort of like fills my cup. And then putting in the time to talk to someone has been huge. It's been a game changer of just even actively carving out that hour to close the door and just focus on me and what I might be feeling or I might need to work through has been really refreshing. Because not that you like to talk about yourself, but you're like, oh, it's like you have permission to like talk about yourself, or
Yeah.
like talk about the things that you need to talk about.
You mentioned earlier that you kind of started your blog because you couldn't really find a story that you related to. Have you found any support groups or resources that you relate to now that you've started it?
Not really specifically like corrections related, but I have definitely found people online who have just connected with me, whether it was through Instagram or my blog, and have just said that, they have felt the same way, that I think more just from a spouse point of view, that like, yeah, it's hard sort of being behind the scenes or in the shadows of the primary focus, especially when you add kids on top of that. It's, again, you focus on yourself already so little when you have kids. So then adding on, taking on that caretaker role to someone, battling PTSD, that in itself can be so lonely. So I've had people just in that sort of capacity reach out and be like, yeah, it's exhausting. Or yeah, I am feeling burnt out. So yeah, it's been great to connect with people, and I think more and more, as people, I've had people reach out to me to share, because again, it's just even on the Facebook groups that I did find, more geared towards military spouses and things like that, like they're private groups, and I get it. A lot of the stuff that you want to share or talk about is very private and personal, but like it's still so hidden for so many reasons. valid reasons. But I think the more that people are willing to share openly, the better that it's going to be for other spouses to feel like, oh man, I am not alone in this, because it is lonely. Yeah, especially in a small town. In a small town, things like this don't happen. There's not, even like support groups or things like that. It's because things like this don't happen in a small town. It's unheard of. So the internet and social media has really been great for that aspect of being able to connect with people.
How has this whole event affected your kids, or has it at all? Or do they understand what happened really?
We've never sat down and really had to talk about it. My oldest is a very smart, perceptive 11-year-old. And so we've had to talk more and more recently about, like, we should probably sit down with her, because I think she knows that something happened, but she's never really brought it up, and we've not. But she did say once at school last year, maybe, she goes, we Googled our last names to see if you could find, the meaning of your name or whatever. She goes, and someone started a GoFundMe page for us. And I was like, oh, that's so strange. I'm like, I kind of sloughed it off, and she never brought it up again. So I kind of just left it. But we've talked about more and more, like, she's in grade 6 and, has an iPad, like has access to, the internet. She could easily find all the news articles that are out there. But yeah, but she's a healthy, thriving, lots of friends, good in school. And our youngest is just in grade 1 this year. So she has like no idea of anything. Like nothing in her life has ever really changed, with my oldest daughter. After we kind of made up the story about how my husband got his black eye, when the week rolled around, when the weekend was over, I said, we're going to have to tell her something, because she's going to realize you're not going to work anymore. Like, she's going to realize you're home.
Yeah.
And so at that point we had said, like, there's bad people in the jail, and Dad got hurt. And when you get hurt, they give you time off. So Dad will be off work. And she was like, does that mean you can drive me to school in the morning? Like, still not like, so even then, that's, we let her know that, like, Dad got hurt, and when you get hurt, you get time off. But we never really had the detailed conversation. So thankfully, they were young enough that, for the most part, their normal day-to-day life never changed or was never affected. And again, really thankful that my husband had the insight to realize right away that he needed help, and that, for all intents and purposes, like, their dad has never had to go away or, changed that much, really. Like, so, yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. That's awesome.
But yeah, like I said, as they get older, it's like, well, yeah, we should probably have a talk, and just sort of just like lay it out there. Like, so I think that something happened to Dad, and, if you ever have questions, you can ask, sort of thing. Because we will talk about things related to it in a roundabout way. Like 2 years ago, my husband was invited to speak at a mental health conference in Nova Scotia that was for first responders. So we went to Nova Scotia for, a long weekend, and, she knows that we went there, and that Dad was, speaking. Like, she knows all these little things. It's just that, maybe we'll just have to put the big picture together one day, and be like, do you have questions? Like, and now it's easier because it's easier for us to talk about.
Yeah.
Whereas in the beginning, it's like, you don't even want to say these things to yourself, let alone think about having that conversation with an 8-year-old.
Well, yeah, exactly.
yeah. So, and we're really, again, really lucky that like the physical injuries were so minimal that we were able to keep it pretty under wraps from them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe it's like too soon to tell. I don't know. But do you think that life for you and your family will ever kind of get back to what it was before this all happened? Or will the PTSD kind of always be there just a little bit, like in the background?
I think we're already sort of getting, getting there. Our life is pretty normal. My husband doing the work that he does now. I mean, he loves work. He is excited about work. He I think if anything, they probably our life is probably better because they're seeing their parents sort of do what they love, and be happy every day. And I think a lot of people, even without PTSD, probably don't get that. So I think that, like, in terms of normal, I think we're there. We do normal things. Our kids are in swimming lessons and extracurriculars, and we try to go camping at least once a summer, and we have friends over for barbecues and have big family dinners and things like that. So yeah, I think we're sort of there in terms of like, and I can only speak for myself, but I think I'm safe to say, for as a family, like, we don't really feel like the PTSD has a real big placeholder. I know it's probably always going to be there, and we
Mm-hmm.
have, I know I have my moments, and I'm sure my husband still has his moments, but now they're moments. And I remember when people would say, like, how are things going? Or, you run into people in the grocery store and they ask, but they're probably really just being nosy. And,
Yeah.
I remember getting to a point where I could say, like, we have more good days than bad. Like, that was sort of my marker. We have more good days than bad. And now I'm really thankful to be able to say, like, I don't remember the last bad day that we had.
Oh my god.
Actually, I think if anything, I've probably had harder days lately, but I think it's because I'm starting to finally work through stuff. But even then, they haven't been like awful. So I
Wow.
think I think in terms of like normal, I think we're there. Knock on wood.
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize that, but that makes me so happy. Oh,
Yeah,
oh, I'm so happy for you guys. That's so awesome.
yeah, and yeah, I think just being able to like have those different kind of steps of closure, and yeah, I mean, I really credit my husband. He's done a lot of really hard work over the years to sort of get to this place. And it's funny, I remember I had gone to a couple of his psychologist appointments just as sort of a support. And my husband's not patient in terms of like how things, like, if he wants things done, he wants it done. And I remember he said to his psychologist, like, so how many sessions do I need before this is done? Like, and he was like, it doesn't really work that way, John. And so my husband was just so adamant to like take whatever steps were needed to sort of like be done, with this PTSD. And his psychologist, he'd be like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I think I'm going to do this. Like, there was one time where he was like, I'm going to go back to the jail. Like, I'm going to go in the jail. Like, he hadn't even been near the building. And his psychologist was like, maybe just try going to the parking lot. And he's like, no, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do this. And sure enough, it didn't go that way, but, he was relentless in, okay, well, I'm going to try again, next week or whatever. And he pushed hard. And, his psychologist would probably say sometimes a little too fast or a little too hard, but he did the work. He did the hard work and found what worked for him. Like I said, the physical activity, the being able to go to the gym, was definitely his outlet and still is. And then being able to find that he was able to turn that passion into a career, I think also made a really big difference. Like when you're happy, that makes a big difference.
Oh yeah. So now that you're kind of, I don't want to say like on the other side of this journey, but
yeah, I feel like we're getting there for sure.
Yeah. Is there any advice that you would kind of give yourself at the beginning of all of this? Or is there any advice that you kind of wish that somebody gave you when this all started?
Oof. Yeah, I wish someone had told me that it was, you know, okay to acknowledge that this was my trauma too.
Yeah.
And it's funny, that acceptance and realization for me came from a very unlikely place. It came from my father-in-law, and my father-in-law is the best. He's from Greece. So he has a very thick accent, and he's very straightforward and doesn't get too mushy usually. But he was driving me to pick up my car from the garage, and this was before the court process had happened, and so he was asking something about it, and I said, I don't know, that's up to John. And he looked at me and he went, it's up to you. It happened to you too. And he just said it so bluntly and matter of factly, and I wasn't expecting it. And so he dropped me off, and I got in my car and I burst into tears because it was like all of a sudden I had this outside validation that I didn't know I needed, or was waiting for, from this unlikely source in my father-in-law, who it was just like, he was like, duh, like, like, and I had a good cry in my car, and I think that was the first time where I was like, wow, I think I knew it, but hearing it out loud from someone else was like, you're right. And that was like the permission I needed to like start writing my blog. I was like, okay, I am allowed to talk about this. I am allowed to, share my version and my struggles of it, and that my healing was part of the overall healing of like our family.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I could go back and tell myself anything or remind someone else of it, it's that, like, yeah, your story is valid and is real, and you do have permission to share or talk about it as you want to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this might be related to that, but if you could say anything to someone else that's maybe having trouble supporting a loved one's mental health journey, what would you say to them?
I would say to them that my number one question when I felt like I couldn't help or I was struggling to help was, what can I do for you? And that was big because sometimes it would be like, you can leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like, okay, what can I do from you? I need you to take the kids so that the house can be quiet for an hour. Okay. What do you need me to do? I need to go to the gym. Okay, you can, like, that, and phrasing it in that way, like not going, what's wrong, or why are you upset, or because oftentimes, like, even people without dealing with mental health struggles, it's hard to put it into words what might be bothering you, or why you're upset. But keeping it as, what can I do for you, made it just so much more cut and dry, because they don't know why they're upset, but they know that you need to F off, or they know that, they need to go for a run, or whatever it is. Usually that was a way that, my husband was able to communicate his needs in a really cut and dry way that wasn't it's not personal. What can I do from you? You can go away. I need you to go away because I need to be alone. Like, it's not personal. It's not because I've done something wrong. Like, that's just what they need in that moment. So I would tell someone, if you're struggling to help someone, like, yeah, start with, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
Keep the questions. Yeah. Don't ask questions.
Yeah.
Because often they don't have the answers, or it won't be the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to have your own support system. Like, we had our families who are great. We're very blessed to have both our families living in the same town who supported us as a whole. But it was crucial for me to have, like, my own support system in my friends that, if I did need to vent, or I did need to just, like, blow off steam, or feel seen or heard, like, without worrying that it would affect how they perceived my husband, that was huge. Like, they knew that, like, John is awesome, and John's a great husband, and John's a great father, and what I was saying wasn't, like, bashing him or anything like that. It was just me saying frustrations, or me having a bad day, and I knew that what I would say wouldn't affect what they thought of John.
Yeah.
And that was key, of having that strong support system. So I would say, like, find your people. And if you don't feel like you have people, I can be your people.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because you can't go through it alone. It's impossible.
Yeah.
It is impossible.
Okay. I only have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
But I do want to touch on your blog and your Instagram page. The Often Unseen. I love that. You kind of explained already the name, but what made you start that in the first place?
I was desperate for some sort of outlet, and I had thought about what I wish I had had in that first year. And yeah, it just really came about, like, I'm ready to start sharing my story, because I need to get it off my chest, or unburied out of this, like, deep dark box I have somewhere. And that if it resonates with one person, then isn't that worthwhile sharing?
Yeah.
And so I wrote maybe the first 2 or 3 posts. I had my husband look at them to kind of get his okay, because I, obviously do talk about him and a lot of it, especially in the beginning. And yeah, once he was like, yeah, of course, and even he had a hard time reading them, because I often wouldn't tell him how I was feeling, because when someone is dealing with their own shit, the last thing you want to do is pile on more or make them feel bad, or, So yeah, it was like, once I kind of, like, got his okay, and was comfortable with what I was sharing, I just started putting it out there.
Have you always been a writer?
No, I guess I wouldn't consider myself a writer. I've always liked to write. Like, I liked English in high school and in university, but yeah, I've never been, like, a quote unquote writer. I kind of just put my thoughts down, and if people want to read it,
Yeah.
then yeah.
So do you have any kind of goals or future plans for your page, or you're just continuing your posts?
In the beginning, I had a lot to share and write, and so the posts were a bit more frequent. I think I was putting out, like, one a week. And as I started to work through things, I I still had lots to share, but I was just being a bit more, I guess I was just being more patient with my sharing. So now I try and put out one like once a month. I took the summer off just to focus on summer. And it always feels like a good way to sort of restart it, because after summer comes September, which always brings lots of feelings. So it's kind of like a good way to get back into it, because it's like, oh yeah, and starting this year, I'd love to like share at like a conference or a retreat or something like that, and just be able to like physically connect with people. Like I said, my husband was able to go to this first responder conference in Nova Scotia. They do every year. It's called Helping the Helpers, and it's put on by a group of volunteers, but it's spearheaded by a former firefighter living with PTSD and his wife, and they're just amazing. And so we got to go. I think when we went, it was the 5th one, and that would have been in 2019. And so they had my husband and a police officer and a 911 dispatcher, and just like all different walks of the first responder world. And it was so great to like connect with people and hear other people's stories and share and things like that. So I'd love to be able to, do that. Like I said, I'm an extrovert. So just to connect with people in person, I think would be really cool. But I mean, I guess the ultimate goal would be maybe not to have stuff to write about anymore. But yeah, my goal is to just continue to share as long as I feel like I have something to share, and as long as people may feel like they connect with it on some level.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about writing a book and sharing, going into a little bit more detail and sharing kind of the whole story in one?
No, I haven't. I guess I've never thought. Yeah, I've never really thought about it, or like there's enough for a book.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, I have just one more question that I ask everybody that comes on the podcast.
Sure.
Is there a stigma or a misconception surrounding mental health that bothers you the most, or that you hear most often but isn't true?
Oh, I'd say there's probably a couple that I think of off the top of my head. One is that there's like, this magical timeline that, after a certain point it should just be like over with, or, you should be over it, and then, that's one, like that there's some magical timeline. Like once, a year passes, you'll be over it or whatever. And then another one I think would be that, like, that people dealing with PTSD are all like dark, monsters, or that, are drinking, like I said, drinking in the basement, locked away from their family. Like it's not, that is the case in many instances, and that's heartbreaking, but that it's just, there's no one way that mental health looks. Oh, you don't look like you deal with that. Well, good. I get, like, I don't know what to say to that, but there's no timeline for healing, and that it just, nothing looks one way.
Oh, yeah. I like both of those.
Yeah. And those are ones that, like, I've come across personally. Like, I remember someone asking me, like a month later, like, oh, so is your husband back at work? And I kind of laughed, like, no. And they went, well, why not? It's over, isn't it? And I was just like, I'm going to walk away. Like,
oh, wow.
But it was just like, wow, there's this like ignorance around how a trauma works. Like, and probably because, maybe some people do go back to work too soon after a traumatic event, or, they clearly don't know anyone living with, a trauma or anything. So, just building that awareness of that, like, whatever your timeline is for healing is valid.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is all the questions that I had for you. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to?
I don't think so.
If people want to reach out to you or have more questions for you, are you open to that?
Yeah, for sure. They can send me a message through my website or they can send me a message on Instagram.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Feel free to reach out at any time. You can contact me on Instagram and Facebook at Stomp the Stigma YYC, and you can email me at stompthestigmayyc@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. And if you or someone you know would like to come on, I would love to have you. Share your story, speak your truth, and together we can stomp the stigma.